Good evening. My name's Al Steinman, and it is my privilege to introduce this evening's performance, which I might add is a world premiere of Submerge, Raising Water Awareness Through Music, Science, and Dance. This evening, we're going to tell you the story of the Great Lakes over the last 12,000 years using original music, original dance choreography, and science narrative. It's really exciting to be able to do this performance here tonight before you and have the world premiere in Michigan. The performers we have here, the professionals and the Grand Valley students, are incredible. I urge you to read about them in the program, where there's more detail that explains their biographies and also how this collaboration came to be. Before we start, I do want to take a moment and introduce a couple of very special people, the collaborators that I've been working with the last 13 months to bring this to fruition. Sookkyung Cho on piano, Grand Valley State University professor of music. And Hannah Seidel, professor of music, who did all the choreography. This evening's performance is being videotaped. Nate Blyton is in the back from Grand Valley is videotaping, so we're asking you please, no photography, no video during the performance. And I also want to acknowledge West Michigan Symphony's own Gabe Slimko, who is doing all the graphics and AV for us. Gabe has been absolutely instrumental in making this happen, and no pun intended on that. I also want to acknowledge our funders, our three funding sources, without whom none of us would be in this room this evening. Grand Valley State University Center for Scholarly and Creative Excellence, the Community Foundation for Muskegon County, as well as the Allen and Helen Hunting Fund, Research and Innovation Fund held at the Annis Water Resources Institute. A couple of program notes before we start. Again, no video or photography, please. For those people in the front row here, do not extend your legs or you'll be part of the performance, and the dancers will not appreciate that. And then finally, because of the critical timing elements between the visual graphics, the music, the dancers, and Roger's narration, we ask kindly that you not applause until the very end of the performance, when you will have thunderous applause in appreciation of this world premiere. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Enjoy the show.
Water, a simple molecule, 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, H2O. But oh, so complex in other ways. Even though 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, only 7/1000% of all water on the planet is readily usable and available to humans. This is equivalent to 1 teaspoonful out of a half-filled bathtub. A person can survive about a month without food, but only about a week without water, as water makes up about 66% of the human body. Currently, about 1.1 billion people lack adequate drinking water access, and 2.6 billion people, 1/3 of the planet's population, lack basic water sanitation. Indeed, 80% of all illness in the developing world is water-related. Yet, despite the absolute necessity of water, we flush our toilets and we sprinkle our lawns with perfectly good drinking water. Did you know that if everyone in the U.S. flushed the toilet just 1 less time per day, we could have enough water to fill a lake approximately 1 mile long, 1 mile wide, and 4 feet deep? What will future generations think of our water stewardship? The Laurentian Great Lakes started forming 15,000 to 20,000 years ago as the Earth's climate warmed and the glacial continental ice sheet retreated. The glacier, up to 2 miles thick, was so heavy and powerful it gouged out the Earth's surface to create the lake basins. Melted water from the retreating glacier then filled the basins. For 10,000 years, tens of thousands of native peoples called the Great Lakes home. They lived, traveled, and traded along its waterways, its scattered villages, growing food both for themselves and to trade, and harvesting the bountiful fish as needed. These tribes lived in respect and awe of the inland seas that they called Gichigami, Ojibwe word for big water, or Michigami, the Ojibwe word for large lake. The first Europeans were awed too. So grand was the scope of these inland seas, it's not surprising that the earliest explorers like Samuel de Champlain assumed they'd reach the Pacific Ocean, closing in on the riches of China and the Orient. In 1634, Jean Nicolet famously donned his Chinese silk robes to meet the Chinese upon arrival on Lake Michigan's west side. He met the Winnebago Indians instead. But change was on its way. The waterways of the Great Lakes were the region's first economic engines, serving as the conduits for shipping goods and raw materials out to a waiting and buying world. The region's waterborne fur trade made Sault Ste. Marie one of the oldest permanent settlements in North America. The passage of fur traders brought European settlements to Detroit, Mackinac Island, and Chicago, and opened up the lakes and connecting rivers for settlement. The natural resources of the Great Lakes included more than just water. Fisheries were so plentiful as to seem limitless. Forests of eastern white pine were thought to provide lumber for a century, and copper, iron ores, and other minerals spanned the shores of Lake Superior. Traffic and trade followed. The city of Muskegon had 47 active sawmills at the height of the lumber era in the 1880s, but within 9 years, not 100. Mills started closing as huge swaths of forest were replaced by stumps and eroding sands. Then came the great industrial revolution in which water played a starring role, the conversion of crops, timber, and minerals to processed food and manufactured goods fueled a dynamic of agricultural industrialization. River and lakefront location drove industrial and community development. Water was the critical resource. Water turned the mills, cooled the machines, and was the key input to the growth of the manufacturing industries that powered the region. Water powered and lubricated it all and set off a cycle of rapid innovation and industrialization. This industrial juggernaut, fueled by our lakes, rivers, and streams, chugged through the better part of the 20th century, creating great wealth and good jobs, but it fouled our waters in the process. It turned our lakes and waterfronts into a riot of factories, slag heaps, rail and shipyards. Communities and downtowns were oriented away from the water. Many of our waterfronts became afterthoughts and dumping grounds. This region of grandeur that inspired reverence in the native peoples and awe among the first Europeans was used and abused for years by the factory economy that dominated our water landscapes, affecting also our psyche. The legacies of our industrial past remain with us today and have helped create an ensemble of modern stressors. Invasive species, over 180 at last count, have fundamentally changed the food web of the Great Lakes. Intensive agricultural practices have resulted in runoff of nutrients and pathogens, resulting in potentially harmful algal blooms and beach closings. Over 90% of our precious coastal wetlands, which serve both as critical habitat and a natural filtration system, essentially operating as the kidneys of our landscape, filtering out pollutants from runoff before they reach our Great Lakes, have been lost to development. As we address these modern stressors, it is essential that we consider the stressors on the horizon, if not already in our direct vision. Among these, we include climate change and its influence on water levels, water temperature, and habitat. Water conflicts, both within our own region as well as the national and international levels. And our groundwater resources, often undervalued because it is out of our direct sight. This subsurface liquid gold is suffering from over-withdrawal and contamination by potentially toxic chemicals and too much salt. These stresses are compounded by our region's complacency towards water conservation, given our apparent water abundance. After all, the Great Lakes contains enough water to flood the entire continental United States with a depth of 10 feet. So, why worry about conservation? Over the past few decades, there has been a growing recognition that the Great Lakes have innate value that transcends commerce and traditional markets, such as cultural and aesthetic values. Federal programs such as the Great Lakes Legacy Act and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative are pouring millions of dollars into remediating toxic waterways, restoring aquatic habitat for fish and wildlife, preventing the introduction of new invasive species, and reducing excess nutrients from reaching our water bodies and therefore reducing the abundance of harmful algal blooms. This new attitude has resulted in a blue economy movement where we use our water resources in a sustainable fashion to grow our economy. We take advantage of our geographic location, but in so doing, we recognize the inherent value of this vast and incredible natural resource, so that both its quality and quantity are maintained for future generations. With a new and growing appreciation of water's innate value, we believe the future is filled with hope and opportunity. We know that stressed ecosystems can recover if the stress is removed, and through transformational education, ensure that future generations don't make the same mistakes as in the past. After all, the least expensive restoration project is the one we never have to do in the first place. And there are roles that all of us can play to make our water futures bright and sustainable. Actionable items we as individuals can take. 1, conserve water. Yellow is mellow. Drown the brown. Turn off the faucet when brushing teeth or washing dishes. Use rain barrels. Reduce nutrient runoff. Nothing down storm drains. And don't over-fertilize. Reduce fossil fuel consumption. Plant trees. Walk or bike if possible. Recycle. Buy low-energy appliances. Energy Star. Invest in nature, i.e., green infrastructure, which provides valuable ecosystem services. Clean air to breathe, healthy water to drink, fertile soil to grow food, abundant fish to eat, protection from floods and storms. Educate yourself. Vote wisely.